So thank you, Eric. And obviously with DJO for 11 years, and as Eric mentioned, went through a lot of different lean processes along with the growth. And the theme, having also been with Eastman Kodak Company, Mitsubishi Electronics, Tyco Healthcare, and a number of other industries, unique in the fact that many different industries, the theme that always resonated was the whole idea of relentlessly reducing lead time. And certainly, you know, anyone can pick a particular measure, whether it's quality or, you know, cost or, you know, cycle time or what have you, and they all connect. So, you know, it's not like you get one and not the other. But my theme has always been relentlessly drive lead time reduction. So, you know, the theme for today's talk is, you know, speed kills, especially if it's too slow. And our new company, that's very important. And I'm going to show a quick video. It's just we're developing the video yet, so you'll see some stock photo symbols. It's because they're stock photos, but it's a work in progress. We haven't actually finished it, but it gives an overview of the power side of our business. And then we do also some other things in another couple of plants that we have in the custom metal fabbing business. But I wanted to show you that and then get into a few other things about our industry, and then specifically get into you know, why speed kills, especially if it's too slow. So I'll bring this video up real quick.
Electricity. It has the power to transform the way we live. It brings communities to life, and sometimes brings life to communities. Electricity can spark the imagination or power innovation. It can be subtle and moving, or it can launch a movement. Electricity transforms, and Power Partners transforms electricity. Power Partners is a leading manufacturer of overhead distribution transformers, and ever since we started more than 50 years ago, we've been transforming the industry from superior product designs and innovation to our unique service model that enables us to consistently offer the shortest manufacturing cycles in the industry and to achieve the fastest response times for resolving emergencies. So what's the source of our power? At its core, it's something we call the PPI way. Our vision is to transform the world through innovative manufacturing, and it shapes our approach to everything we do. You can see it in our quality standard of total customer satisfaction through continual process improvement. Our team is driven to do things the right way and to make products that add value to our customers and to yours from the moment they start their day until they turn off the lights at night. We are Power Partners, and it's the power of partnership that makes us different. Like partnering with our alliance customers, so we can see real-time inventory of each transformer style at their locations and replace products in 2 weeks or less. Or creating innovations like our unique center bolt cover design that improves safety and efficiency for our partners. And holding product innovation sessions with our partners, customers, and suppliers that keep us as the recognized innovator in our industry. Or partnering with utility companies in times of crisis. Power Partners transforms power as a leader in sustainable manufacturing initiatives through certification in ISO 9001-2008 and 14001. And through the satisfaction of our utility, industrial, and commercial customers in North America, Central America, Mexico, the Caribbean, and beyond. Working with our suppliers, we provide value to our customers, associates, and our community by responsibly producing reliable, energy-efficient distribution and cooling solutions. Because you're only as powerful as your partners.
So just real quick to highlight a couple items that were in the video. Yep, that better? Our vision is transforming the world through innovative manufacturing. Our values, not identified in there, but safety, quality, delivery, and cost, and we really drive that in that order, particularly with our alliance customers and some of the industry that we are in. And then you can see the other values that we have there, and we'll talk a little bit later about line of sight and the whole idea of, in order to have speed, you really need to have everybody aligned as to what is your mission, vision, and how are you going to go about doing that, so that there isn't a lot of misunderstanding around some of the basics of how we want to do things. We have two different manufacturing locations. Our main site is in Athens, Georgia, and you can see there the square footage. And then, the main products are overhead distribution transformers, so it's the things you see on telephone poles. And 30% of our business is actually West Coast. So we have San Diego Gas and Electric, Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern Cal Edison. So we have a lot of business that's West Coast based, in addition to obviously Southeast and other areas. And the history is we were originally founded in 1958 by George Westinghouse. So the factory was built way back then. We have 2 unions in the facility. Really not posed any issues over the last 10 years under the Power Partners name in transforming the industry to a lean, speed-focused business. So I know it's the first industry I've been in that had unions and really have not found that to be any issue. And we have about 500 employees for the company employment. So 15 acres under roof, big building in Athens, about $50 million of equipment that's pretty old-based equipment. We've been going through a lot of lean transformations and cellularization activities, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of some of the tools that help drive speed. Some of our alliance customers, so again, I mentioned a lot of West Coast alliances. And alliance customer means that, as you saw in the video, we actually see their inventory real time and we respond to that prior to them even knowing they're having a potential issue. And we're working on some technology where the transformer actually will communicate with us so we understand potentially it be approaching a failure mode so we can actually respond prior to an outage versus after failure. So pretty much today the entire grid operates. When it fails, your power goes out, somebody goes out there and fixes it. Okay, so that's a whole different area and arena that we're getting into as the industry transforms. You'll notice that we don't have a lot of utilities up in the Northeast, so we did get a lot of business out of that just because of our response time. So that's another reason for why we're, the stress on lead time reduction. We had a lot of their alliance manufacturers could not respond as fast as we could, even though we did not have any of their specifications. Some other products that are of interest, we have an adsorption chiller. That's with a D, not a B. So it takes waste heat and heat from solar panels and so forth, and it uses that through it's all in a vacuum, and there's a silicone gel panels that then from that condensate process creates chilled water at about 45 degrees. So you can use one of our chillers to cool a 50,000 square foot space on the power of 800 watts. So pretty significant in terms of its power consumption. And it's a new technology. We're the owners of that in the Western Hemisphere. And obviously we're continuing to develop that. We have some grants with the US Navy and see a real great potential for that for not only industrial applications, but someday, commercial or home use. These are some of the areas that have the chillers. You can see today most of our customers are folks that are really wanting to make a statement about the environment, because the cost per tonnage on initial investment is quite a bit higher than an absorption chiller technology. But as we develop the technology, we expect to make that less of an issue. So you can see one of our last one of our more recent introductions, we actually sold a chiller to China. So we're proud of that as being a U.S. manufacturer, actually sending a chiller from the U.S. over to it's Hong Kong, but we call that China. So anyhow, so again, a neat technology. And then we have a custom metal fabbing business that's in upstate Georgia. We have 2 factories up there, and they focus on custom metal fabrications. So in terms of transforming the world through innovative manufacturing, that's a passion of both myself and my partner Steve Hollis. And as we build the company, we are focused on developing jobs for the U.S. And the whole purpose of the talk, when Eric and I talked in Chicago, I was talking about reshoring of manufacturing into the U.S. And one of the big things around how do you reshore, you need to utilize the assets that you have and the advantage that you have. And one of them is obviously lead time. So what's our most valued resource? People. So for you personally, what's your most valued resource? Don't say yourself. Time, yeah. And what do we say about time? There's all the different definitions of time. Everybody, you can pick which definition you like. But, rate of speed of a measured activity. So, that's kind of where you get into speed kills, especially if it's too slow. So you take time, and how do you equate that to, what we see every day in our life, either in our own life or in, other activities that we see. And so what is speed? It's the rate or measure of motion, distance traveled by the time of travel, and then the swiftness of action. And I think that's the focus of our talk today, is swiftness of action, and how does lean fit into all of that. So when you talk about time and speed, right, in our lives, relationships, if I had more time, in the fullness of time, wish I could spend more time with my kids, with my parents. A lot of people would say, if you're on your deathbed and you said, what would you do more of? You probably would say one of those things. I doubt you would say, I would spend more time at a Lean Summit conference at Cal Poly, or I would not say I would spend more time keynote speaking, as an example. He died before his time. In sports, you look at all the different sports out there, and generally speaking, and my daughter contradicted me the other night when I was showing this to her, most teams that have the faster athletes are typically have a greater chance of winning. You see that in basketball, football. Everybody wonders why the SEC is so much better than the Big Ten in football, and a lot of it has to do with speed. So I'm a Big Ten person, by the way. So not Ohio State, though. I have a sister that went to Ohio State, so I'm a Michigan State guy, so we have a common foe. It's called the University of Michigan. Is there anybody from the University of Michigan here in the room? Just want to make sure. You're not going to admit it, huh? Okay. So again, time and speed, and if you look at other things, it was interesting this year. Most of you know Chuck Yeager, and he was the first to break the speed of sound. And he did that on October 14th, 1947. But that picture, it shows up on TV kind of as the year-end photos, and it's that picture of this guy falling out of the sky. Well, it's this Felix Baumgartner who wanted to break the speed of sound in a free fall. Don't ask me why he really had the desire to do that, But he wanted to break the speed of sound in free fall, and he did that on the anniversary, the 65th anniversary date of Chuck Yeager breaking the speed of sound in an aircraft. They can't actually confirm if he actually broke the speed of sound or not, so I guess he's got to go back and try it again. I don't know. But it is interesting, our infatuation with speed, you know, not only in our lives, but in sports or in other activities. And then when you talk about speed in business and being lean people, you look at all the words that connect to speed. You know, time to make a decision, you know, time to develop, time to market, time to make, time to ship, time to cash, cycle time, lead time, tack time. Everything has a speed or time element to it, a lot of things in lean. So again, you know, reinforcing why speed and lead time is so important. And, you know, to us in our business, you know, it's really critical around emergency response. So the lean methodology really resonates as a business model for the industry that we're in. And I would argue it resonates with anybody's business. You know, you've got folks here from healthcare, you know, from all types of industries. And having been in multiple different industries, there's not a single industry where it doesn't very strongly resonate and really is impactful in terms of that industry's ability to be competitive. So, you know, here it gives you an example of, we actually were the supplier, sole source supplier for Joplin, Missouri. And when that disaster happened, we had transformers to them in 24 hours. They did not carry any inventory. So you can see some of the stats there. Their entire city council actually came to our facility and thanked us this year, visited the plant. We had everybody wearing a Joplin, Missouri t-shirt. I think their colors are yellow. They're not the prettiest shirts in the world, but anyhow, it does show how important speed is, particularly when it involves somebody getting their power back and all the things that connect with power. And then this year was Hurricane Sandy. So again, in our industry, very important. So what about operational efficiency and total cost? And this is where I get into, you know, the whole idea of what happens and why are we not as competitive as what we should be in terms of keeping jobs here in the U.S. And I would argue that any manufacturer who has majority of their market in the U.S. can be competitive with overseas manufacturing. And so I think over time you'll see and hear more and more about manufacturing coming back into the U.S. because of that. And I would argue if you don't see that or realize that opportunity, you're not, in my opinion, looking at your total cost structure. And having been in a lot of organizations, big organizations, small organizations, I will tell you the bigger the organization gets, the more difficult it is to make sure all of the dots are actually connected. So again, that's my experience and my premise if I talk to anybody that's making products overseas that could be making products in the U.S. So in that context, when you're looking at reducing lead time, you know, it really connects to less complexity as you look at, is it value add or isn't it value add? And then less complexity comes less cost. So again, that connection between the lead time and the cost, and the idea that when you look at all of those pieces, you can definitely, in my opinion, look and find a lower cost overall supply chain if you're manufacturing in the U.S. And I'll talk about some of the tools that we use to demonstrate that. The other thing I wanted to touch on is when you talk about the total value stream, make sure you capture the entire value stream. And the last three items, I think, are areas that I think we're starting to realize a lot more are a part of that value stream, but I don't think as all the jobs moved offshores, people considered those items fully. So value of nationally and locally reinvested wages, in the economy and the tax base. So we talk about needing more income. So obviously, we can get into a lot of political discussion, but everyone would agree if you have a bigger base, you're going to get more income. So what have we done with our tax base? Right? So all those jobs that went overseas, they're benefiting from that tax base. So it's not just about an hourly wage. Education, arts, all those things are impacted by what happens to a manufacturing job in the U.S. And that's obviously not something that we capture effectively or at all, in my opinion. So from our perspective, as a company that's been in the U.S. for over 50 years, just one item, we contribute to over 30 different charities as a company. So that job leaves, what happens to that contribution to society? That's never factored into a business model for why should you move a job overseas. And then, obviously in our business, we stress in our values all of our people. And then you talk about, well, what are those people learning and what are those people doing? And then how are they able to contribute to society? That's all part of that total value equation. So, as you think about that and as you run across that as either manufacturers or in government or in, education, we need to have to do a lot better job of understanding that value. So why simplify and reduce lead time? And this is all pretty standard lean stuff. You've probably heard this at a lot of the different sessions that you've been at. Obviously faster response to changes, customer demand and mix, and particularly as you start getting into the innovation equation. And I haven't talked a lot about that, but having manufacturing that's very closely linked to your innovation will create faster innovation. The whole aspect of smaller batch sizes and what happens to obsolescence or if you have a quality problem, all of that ties into that total cost structure and why you want to be reducing your total lead time. And then the financial benefits. Carrying costs, faster return on investments, reduce on costs of wasteful or NVA steps. That's all the traditional stuff. And frankly, there's probably enough there to really document and justify why manufacturing in the U.S., when you're a lean organization, really is competitive to any place else in the world. So I'll talk a little bit about, I think hopefully I've made the case that speed is important. Did I make a case that speed is important? Okay, good. You're not falling asleep yet, right? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about PPI and the PPI way, and you heard that in the video. We're obviously very big on partnershiping, and that's it's in our name and in each of our divisions. But part of that, and through the PPI way, is making sure we're partnering with our suppliers, our customers, and all our employees. So the first thing is, do we have a clear line of sight management? And I'll talk about how we go about line of sight management. Okay. We'll talk about value stream mapping, and that's the core of how we go about looking at our processes in our business. The first thing we do is we hold a session and we value stream map that particular aspect from front to back. And then from there we build plans and Kaizen events and everything that connect to driving that value stream to a different state. And so that's where we get into the Kaizen blitzes, and I'll talk about those, and then the kata, or the daily regiment, where we get into the Gemba walks and how do we, every day make sure we're moving ourselves closer to that target condition that we establish through the value stream mapping sessions. So that's really the heart and soul of what we call the PPI way. And like anything, we have a great big model, and I don't expect you to read that. I don't know, Eric, do they have copies, or I can leave you a copy if anybody wants a copy of the presentation. Okay. And so if you want to dig into that model, but I'll use a pointer here real quick. I'm glad my head's only covering the bottom of the, so along the top we have what we call, this is really the core of our line of sight. And we start over here with a 3 to 5 year strategy. We develop an annual framework that really takes the strategy, which includes our vision and mission, and boils it down to a annual plan. And so you'll see the vision and mission here. These are key result areas, key measures that drive the results, and then key activities. So there's a linkage between all those at an annual level. And then every quarter we create every part of the business what we call a quarterly plan. And in that quarterly plan, obviously, there's the execution and how we go about driving that quarter tactically. And we review that every day, or not every day, every week as a team. But then that's on display and for everyone in the company to actually see what we're trying to do as a company. And then there's connectivity all the way down to the shop floor with various different plans. And then we have what we call a dashboard. And I'll talk a little bit more about the measurement side and how we link that to the shop floor in real time so they can see exactly what they're doing and how it relates all the way up to the strategic plan of the company. So that's, again, what we call line of sight. And then in the middle here is really a big toolbox of different tools that are used to drive the improvement in our value streams. So we really stress the importance of not using every tool, but picking the right tool for the particular problem. We're much heavier focused on the lean tools than we are the Six Sigma tools. So, I think over time, and obviously certain processes have more opportunity with Six Sigma, but, what we don't want to do is add more non-value add onto a non-value add activity, right? So first step is really asking the question, do we need that particular step? Do we need that particular activity or process? If we don't, let's get rid of it, right? So that's the quickest way to reduce lead time, is really be rigorous around what activities are really adding value. So that's kind of the overall model of the PPI way, just to give you a brief understanding. When we get into line of sight, we have things we call pacer boards, and every part of the business has a board, and it'll show a target and actual, and that target and actual is for that day. So we schedule everything on a daily basis from a demand-based perspective. And then that tells every 2 minutes where that process is related to its target. So it automatically updates itself. I actually have a app that I can click on my iPhone and know exactly where every plant is and every line. They don't like me to know that, but I can see that, and that's what this is down here, is what we call the Pacer Board mobile app. But it also gives us an opportunity, and no matter where our leaders are or even our operators, that they can actually see how the business is doing in their particular area. So again, it's important to understand and relate the result to all the activities that we do. So value stream mapping, I think this is all, review for most of you, but understanding the difference between lead time, cycle time, and tack time. And those are the definitions. And we really stress lead time, okay? And, I always say to somebody that's interviewing for a CI, continuous improvement position, or an industrial engineering position, and they say they've done lean, you ask them the question, what's the difference between cycle time and lead time? And believe it or not, a lot of engineers can't give you the difference between the two. They typically will call cycle time lead time and lead time cycle time. So everybody knows the difference between lead time and cycle time, right? Yes? Well, it's up here on the board, so you can't miss it. So the key is that in the value stream mapping, that's what we look at, is identifying all of that lead time from front to back. And so this is, standard, high level, what is a value stream map? And, you have on the top, all the different pieces of the organization. And frankly, over on this side, we have supplier value streams that we're adding on, and then you have the customer value streams on this side. But typically, we're still very heavily into this, and we'll be adding these other parts. But that's what we really look at. And then from that, what are the sub-value streams that then we break that down into? And then even further from that, what are the sub-processes that then we go and perform a Kaizen event on or something of that nature to improve that particular process. And then with the value stream maps, sessions, these are big sessions. We involve everybody that is involved in that value stream. So typically it's anywhere from 3 to 5 days. And that entire value stream will get mapped out. And then both a current state, and then we go through, and typically our first step is we identify the actual cycle time, and we establish the gap between the lead time and the cycle time as our opportunity. So as you know, that isn't the real full opportunity, but that's what we typically do as we start out, because there's lots of waste within what some companies and organizations call cycle time. But we just take the lead time and the delta, and it's usually 95% of the time, there's a 95% delta between your lead time and your cycle time. And I'll show that here in a minute, but that's true of just about any industry I've ever been in. And I've actually spent some time in the healthcare industry, and I don't think it's much better. So then Kaizen, I think everyone understands what that is, and that's the sub-process to the value stream mapping. So, when we first start out, we'll have, regular scheduled Kaizen events that come from the 30-day and 60-day plans. And then from that, we'll, finish up a 30 or 60-day plan on a value stream and then reinitiate another value stream mapping session to create that new opportunity. So I think everybody understands this. All work is either value-adding or non-value-adding. Again, the basics of what are you trying to eliminate right out of the gate is the non-value-adding activity. And we typically will bring in our sales folks, and more recently we've been bringing in alliance customers to help us better define from their perspective what they would view as value-adding. And that's a very interesting dialogue. We had Georgia Power in, and you start looking at how a transformer is built, and what their view is of value adding is quite different from ours. So very insightful if you can bring your customers into that equation through those value stream mapping sessions. And I'll just click this on here real quick. So this is really a standard example of a typical value stream, and would argue this is true of any industry, whether it's manufacturing, healthcare, and some industries may even be worse than this. But when you look at the value add and the non-value add, so typically you take the total amount of time, and 95% of it typically is non-value adding. When you go through and say, what's really adding value in building a product? Most organizations spend a lot of time and capital on reducing the value-adding portion of that. So most capital expenses is on doing what? Getting a faster machine, better machine, so forth and so on. And really all that's doing is addressing the cycle time and having no impact on the lead time. So a lot of the auto industry went down that path of, I never forget, several years ago, before the Great Recession, the head of Ford getting up and saying the key to them being successful is they need to recapitalize and automate all their factories. And I remember sitting there thinking, you know what, these guys aren't going to last too much longer. But that I think is the biggest issue with most American manufacturers, that they're not understanding the need to focus on that non-value add time. We love technology, but really understanding and applying how do you get rid of that is the key. The other, as you get into some of the tools of, reducing that in the factory, obviously cellular manufacturing is a key concept, and one-piece flow. And most folks don't understand, when you look at the various different ways you lay out a flow. I've had, engineers talk about, reorganizing into a flow like this, and you see a lot of that goes on. And the thought is, well, we have a one-piece flow. Well, the reality of that is, they're caged, so you can't move to the bottleneck. So this is actually a better layout. So we go through a lot of that, exercise, given all the different processes that we have. And it's important that if you have somebody designing a cell, they actually know how to design a cell. That seems pretty trivial, but unless you've experienced it, a lot of people will tell you they know how to design a cell, but unless they get into the actual work content and break down every step of that work content in and as part of that cell design, they're not really redesigning the workflow into a cellular configuration. So we see a lot of that with our own engineers and getting them to understand that work content, and then culturally, what does that mean to all the operators and the people in the business? So as we go through our factory and we look at layouts, we really focus on three key things. And if you come into the factory, you'll see in each of the areas these three documents: the line balance, the standard work layout, and then the work combination. And what we do is we have playbooks, so we call them playbooks. So when the schedule changes, the line teams pick the playbook based upon what the schedule is. But the key is they have the playbook. So our view of self-directed and empowered work teams is that they do have plays that they run. They're not just coming up with the Hail Mary on every new schedule. So if you go into a lot of factories that have cells, sometimes you'll see factories that have been cellularized that have never really been able to capture much benefit out of that. And in fact, in some cases, they've even gotten worse. It's because they don't really have a playbook for how that cell should run based on different load models. So again, it's a part of that whole process that we work hard on in driving down that lead time. The other tool I want to talk about is the daily kata. So every day we have Gemba walks in all our locations. I try to go on them as much as I can. But requirement of all our leaders is that they're on at least one Gemba walk per week. Okay, so all office personnel, whether you're in customer care, whether you're in engineering, design, what have you, you are a part of a Gemba walk in the factory at least once a week. And we have some that are in there every day, but they happen all the time. And a key aspect of developing a relentless desire for speed is that every day you're looking at how do we improve to get to that next level. And that's really where the kata comes in, and getting the cell teams and the operators on the floor to be able to make changes every single day, driving them towards the target condition. So again, a key aspect of how we go about that. And during the Gemba walks, we do the typical ask the 5 questions. How many of you have been through a description or session on kata? A few of you? Okay, so I'm not hopefully boring you with all this. Kata is a whole nother aspect of how and why have the Japanese been so much more competitive even after companies have gone and cellularized, or put Kanbans in, or looked at the value stream and took out some of the non-value add steps. And yet you'll see a company like Toyota continue to outperform other companies that are claiming, and it visually appears to be doing the same thing. The key difference is the whole Gemba and kata aspect, right? Is Toyota and organizations that have that are every single day moving towards an improvement condition outside of the big changes that might have taken place months ago. Does that make sense? So a very important aspect of how do you create a culture of continuous improvement and a culture of continuous lead time reduction? And then we have what's called the Gemba Cam. So we actually implemented this about 9 months ago, actually, and we had all the little, suggestion forms and all kinds of different things for how people will change things in the organization. And we said, let's give everybody an iPad, and when they see an out-of-compliant condition, they take a picture of it. And the only criteria is if they take a picture of it, it goes up to a Skype, and we can actually all see it. They have to correct it with a photo of an after picture within 24 hours. So since we introduced that, it dramatically increased the number of change and the speed of change, because it's real easy to take a picture of something that's out of compliance. You don't have to describe a lot. And then, it automatically, indexes itself, and then make the change and take a picture of it after. So again, a neat way to drive that Gemba and Kata every single day for continuous improvement. So, kind of wrapping up my discussion, and we can have some Q&A. From our perspective and from my perspective, it really is about simplification, lead time, and driving that speed equation. And seen it in all the industries I've been in, and all the time that I've been involved with AME, which has been, 25 some odd years, been in hundreds of companies. Those that do it typically thrive, and those that don't survive. Okay, so that's really where it came up with the idea that speed kills, especially if it's too slow. And if we as a country don't continue to start understanding that, whether it's in government or industry, I think we'll continue to see a lot of issues with our ability to be competitive, stay competitive, create new jobs, and create a good future for ourselves and our kids. So with that, I'll open up the floor to questions. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. And keep in mind, that's not the only thing that we're not, these guys running around with our chickens with our chicken with the head cut off kind of thing. It's all about the process and the understanding. Right. The question is, I talked a lot about speed, but didn't talk much about variability. And obviously variability affects overall speed. So the more variable that flow is, when you add it all together, in all likelihood, the slower your overall speed will be. So we do practice where we can, do balancing and level load and match with our customers more real time, their real demand versus other spots of inventory that can create those bigger fluctuations. But I will tell you that in most cases, the fluctuation is not the end customer's doing. It's usually something in between, a distributor, an inventory bucket that the customer has, but it's not actually their reflection on real usage. So that's why it's so important to get to that end customer drumbeat and what is actually happening with the product usage. So that's why we really focus on, can we see the inventory real time? But great question. Other questions? Yes?
You mentioned early on that you were able to beat your competitors in terms of time of delivery, even though you didn't have the specs for the transformers that the customers wanted. I'm curious about how you guys go through product development and really sure that all the non-value added.
So, could everybody hear that question? It was about, the lead time and how we were able to respond to the Hurricane Sandy situation faster than some of our competitors who already had the business. And how do we deal with the engineering and the spec side of, being able to respond, quickly. Same principles apply in engineering, and we apply them there. We have a cycles of learning process that we apply, and we operate in a cellular configuration on any new product development activity. And we measure our lead times and our cycle times for all the different activities of product development. So same tools, same approach, just a different process. So that's how we're able to respond a lot quicker. And we do, value stream events on, and have done on our front end, which includes our sales folks as well as our customers, on how does that spec come over to us. Because most of the time, that's where a lot of the time is spent in getting the spec translated appropriately. So we spend a lot of time on creating templates. And so in our case, we actually went out to all the utilities we don't have and created spec templates under the idea, we didn't go to every utility. We just went to the ones which are hurricane prone or weather prone. So we have a template in place so that if we do have those events happen, we already can follow a template for being quicker to respond. But it's about thinking about that whole value stream. So all the same tools apply. Hopefully that helped answer your question. Other questions? We had one over here. Right, great question. So you mentioned we have a slide that's called the 7S, and everybody hears about the 5 S's. So we have 2 other S's. We have safety and security. You hear about 5S plus 1. So we said, well, let's just make it 6 S's. And then, we said, well, we don't want to have 6S plus 1. So we said, well, we'll make it 7 S's. So that's how we came up with 7 S's. So it includes safety and security. And then we do have an 8th S that we're working on, and it's called style. I don't do well with that one, but anyhow, but it is, so we added those 2 in, just because again, it's a mindset of how we want to operate every day. Other questions? So great question. The question is, how do you deal with the lead time where the customer, you're waiting on the customer for something? And in your case, you're waiting on for either a response on a spec or something like that. And we have a lot of that, both in the utility side, but also in our custom metal fabbing business. So we do a lot of work for Cribmaster. So all those machines that you see in the self-vending machines, we're the sole producer of those for Cribmaster. But they're constantly changing the configuration based upon who's putting what into those things. And so that's a big problem with us. So what we did in that case is we held a value stream event with them and had them become part of our process. And so that would be the first step, is if you can, get the customer to understand the importance of lead time and then contribute with you in your value stream mapping sessions. And then identify what are those areas of waste in that cycle. Because it does come back where, usually in that case, then they come back to you because you're late. So it is really important. That's, again, a key aspect of why we call ourselves, we have the word partner in all of our various different divisions, is because it really is, if you're going to look at the full value stream and optimize the full value stream, you have got to partner with everybody. So we really practice and work hard on partnering with the customers. And those customers are, the ones that, obviously become your best customers and so forth and so on. But that would be my recommendation, is if you can, get them involved in an event. Invite them to an AME event. pay their way, so if they are totally unfamiliar with some of the concepts. Other questions? Are we running out of time, Eric? Are we okay? Okay. Okay.
So, how do you deal with the missing part or shortage, the speed when you need to complete something? Is that an issue in your production line that you're missing part, you cannot complete a product? What do you do that for?
Yep, we obviously measure that. We measure, our lead times from our suppliers. So again, as you move towards a demand-based schedule, you've got to have suppliers understanding the need to reduce their lead time, because they're not going to be able to respond as slowly as they have in the past. So we hold Kaizen events and value stream mapping sessions with our suppliers on key components, because there's a lot of components that frankly don't have that problem. I don't think there's anyone who could say you can't get corrugated in a couple of days. It used to be it'd take weeks and months. So the industry is certainly moving more and more towards faster lead times, but we take our critical suppliers on critical components like electrical, steel, and that type of thing, and involve them in those value stream mapping sessions and Kaizen events. Okay.